first this morning, sweeping a proposal on gun control, not here, but in Canada.
Yeah,
that's where it's happening. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced new legislation to cap the number of handguns in that country. Nancy Cordes is at the White House, where President Biden is urging Congress to take action. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Vlad and Anne-Marie. Yeah, there is a small group of bipartisan U.S. senators who are going to be meeting virtually today and throughout the week to see if they can find some kind of a framework to move forward with gun reform proposals. But while the Texas massacre appears to be spurring some initial steps here in the U.S., our neighbors to the north are already taking action.
We need less gun violence. We cannot let the guns debate become so polarized that nothing gets done. We cannot let that happen in our country.
The new proposal announced by Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would freeze handgun sales and implement a gun buyback program for military-style weapons. Those weapons were banned in Canada following a 2020 mass shooting in Nova Scotia that claimed 22 lives.
We need only look south of the border to know that if we do not take action firmly and rapidly, it gets worse and worse and more difficult to counter.
Here at home, President Biden said yesterday he wants to see tighter gun restrictions too, especially when it comes to the AR-15 style rifle used by the gunman in Uvalde, Texas.
Remember, the Constitution, the Second Amendment, was never absolute.
Mr. Biden admitted there is little he can do on his own without Congress, and the votes aren't there for an assault weapons ban. But this week, the two sides will discuss closing background check loopholes and a red flag law that would allow judges to take guns away from people who are deemed to be a risk. Later today, President Biden will welcome New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to the White House. She imposed a nationwide ban on semi-automatic weapons in 2019 after a gunman killed more than 50 people at two mosques in Christchurch.
When we saw something like that happen, everyone said never again. And so then it was incumbent on us as politicians to respond to that.
Unlike President Biden, Prime Minister Ardern is able to make big changes like that without legislation, which is one big difference between the U.S. and New Zealand. Vlad and Anne-Marie.
So, Nancy, yesterday President Biden said that he believes there is a realization among what he calls rational Republicans that the nation cannot continue like this. Who are these rational Republicans? Who's he talking about and who's he talking to?
Well, the ones he name-checked were John Cornyn, Republican senator from Texas, and the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. Now, McConnell has a long history of rejecting gun reform legislation, but this time around he has said that he is sort of deputizing Senator Cornyn to talk with Democrats. And so the president is trying to pump that up and say, look, they appear to be open. This time around, he wants to draw attention to those discussions, while at the same time not getting too close to them, because we are, after all, in an election year. That's a time when Republicans typically don't want to be working with the president of the opposing party too closely. Nevertheless, this is an interesting moment that we are in. Often we don't even see the two sides getting together to talk about these issues. But, I have to caution you, it is still really early days here. They are still meeting to try and figure out if they can even agree on sort of the sphere of reform that they'd all be comfortable with before they decide whether to really get into talks over the nitty-gritty.
And Nancy, I know I got to ask you about the meeting with Fair Chair Jerome Powell, but just another point on that. I mean, Senate's also going into recess, as we know.
Right.
And I was thinking about this because I was away. I was out of the country during the horror that most people in this country were experiencing, including those families in Texas. But it struck me that we live in a very different time than the times that we were living in when Sandy Hook happened, Anne-Marie. We did not have social media then, and politicians were not responding to the anger and frustration of voters on social media. I wonder if there's a sense, Nancy, that they might try to tread water while they go into the recess and hope that it falls off of the front pages, except that you do have the pressure on social media, and thus that means mainstream media keeps the pressure up.
Right. I mean, that certainly has been a Republican tactic in the past. After one of these major shootings, they say, well, now is not the time to talk about guns. We need to show respect to the victims, with the hopes that by the time that Democrats think it is time to talk about guns, that it's fallen off the front pages. This time around, they are having these virtual meetings during the recess. And in a way, that could prove to be more productive than if they were meeting face-to-face on Capitol Hill, because you know what would happen on Capitol Hill? You'd have dozens of reporters standing there outside of the meeting, and as soon as the senators from both sides came out, they'd say, what did you discuss? What did you discuss? Did you agree to anything? And that would, I'm all for reporters covering stories, of course, but, this is, if there is going to be some kind of compromise, it is going to be a major shift and could be very difficult politically for Republicans. So perhaps in these early stages, the less of a spotlight you have on these incremental discussions, it could be for the better. Now, this is, a brief recess. They will be back on Capitol Hill, and any discussions are going to play out over weeks, if not months. So, we'll see whether the talks bear fruit. But as of now, they're scheduled to take place behind the scenes over Zoom or what have you, as they're all back in their respective home districts.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to pivot.
Yeah.
So I was going to pivot because we have this other big meeting that's happening. The president's meeting this afternoon with the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, to talk about inflation. What can we expect to come out of that?
So this is the first time that President Biden is meeting with the Fed chair since Mr. Biden renominated him for the position at the top of the Fed. And what the White House says the president really wants to emphasize today, well, you'll probably hear from him at the top of that meeting before they're behind closed doors in the Oval Office, is the fact that he wants the Fed to be independent. He supports the full independence of the Federal Reserve. And you might say, well, of course, that's how it's supposed to be. That's not exactly how it worked in the last administration. President Trump was very open about what he wanted the Fed to do, typically lower interest rates. And President Biden is going to stress that he has a very different approach that is more in line with previous presidents. It's an important message the White House feels to send to the market. Beyond that, President Biden is going to reiterate once again that inflation, he believes, is his top priority and the top priority for the Fed, and that he supports the Fed chair doing whatever he feels is necessary, even if it means raising short-term interest rates once again, in order to get inflation under control.
All right, Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.